Welcome to lesson 4.9, rational numbers. It's your first video lesson. How exciting. Sorry I can't be there today with you, but we're going to have a lot of fun anyway. It's like I'm here. So objective, I can classify, compare, and calculate the distance between two rational numbers. Well, first you have to think to yourself, what is a rational number? So a rational number is a number that is written as the ratio of two integers. Well, what's a ratio? Well, remember, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers. And we usually write them with a colon, the word two, or fraction, right? And when we think about ratios of two integers for rational numbers, we're going to think about the fraction part. So some examples might be 4/5. Right? That's a fraction. That's a ratio. It compares two things. It compares 4 and 5. We could have -1/3. That works as well. Now, could we also have decimals? Absolutely, right? We found out yesterday any decimal can be written as a fraction. So we could have something like 0.25 because that's really 1/4 as a fraction, right? Or could we have something like 0.3 repeating? Absolutely, right? Even though it's a repeating decimal, we can still write that as a fraction. If you were to go backwards, that's really 1/3. And what about whole numbers? Let's see. Is 5 a rational number? Well, let's see. 5. Can I write 5 as a fraction? Yeah, that's really the same as 5/1, which is just 5, right? So if you think about it, any number that we've talked about so far this year in math is a rational number because it's a comparison of two things and we can always write it as a fraction. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to compare and classify them. So what we're going to do is plot the following rational numbers on the number line and label it with a letter. So remember, the only thing we need to remember is here we have 0. These are getting bigger. These are getting smaller the farther we move away. And it looks like we go from 0 to 0.5, but there's this little dash in between. So what's halfway between 0 and 5/10? Or 0.5? Well, a quarter is, right? So really, this is 0.25. So be careful. Every time we're going up 25 hundredths, okay? And here, every time we're going back 25 hundredths. So if we look at this first one here, we have -0.5, and that's A. Well, that's really easy. That's right here. It's already listed for me. So I'm going to write it with an A and label it. Next one I have is 1.25, so I have my 1. Now, halfway between 1 and 0.5 is 1.25, so this must be my B. Now, -1/3, well, remember, that's -0.3 repeating, right? So if I'm not sure where -1/3 goes, I could always write that in my calculator. Handy dandy calculator. And I'm going to do -1 divided by 3. And I get -0.333333. And now I have to think to myself, all right, is this right here, looking over here, I have 0, this is -0.25, right? So -0.333 repeating is going to be, is it going to be between 0 and -0.25? No, because it's even smaller than that. So it's going to be in between these two. Now, I don't know exactly where because there's not a little notch for it, but I can create a notch for it. So I'm going to put it right here the best I can, okay? So let's see. D is 1/2. Well, that's really easy. That's right here. And then E is -5/3. Ooh, I don't know. I know 5/3 is going to be bigger than 1, but I don't know where. So I can get out my calculator and decide. So I'm going to type in -5 divided by 3, and I get -1.6. I'm going to write that, -1.6. Remember from yesterday, it keeps going 6. That's just because my calculator is rounding. So really, I need a bar over it, right? So then if I look here, well, that's smaller than -1, and it's smaller than -0.5, but where does it fit in here? Well, remember, if these go up by 0.25, this is going to be -1.75. So -1.6 repeating is somewhere between -1.5 and -1.75. So it would be right about here, I would say. Okay? So remember, negative numbers on a horizontal number line, this is a horizontal number line, they get smaller the farther you move away from 0, right? So that really means is if we look at C is -1/3. -1/3 is bigger than -1/2, right? Because it's closer to 0. If we look at E, -5/3 is smaller than -1/2 because it is farther away from 0, okay? So there are a few ways to compare negative numbers on the number line. One way to do it is to plot the numbers on the number line like we did before. Another way to do it is to convert both numbers to decimals and compare their place values. Right, so if we look up here, for this one, we took the fraction and converted it to a decimal, and then we figured out where it was going to be plotted. Right? Okay, so looking down here, what I want you to do is order the numbers here from least to greatest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right, so those are all the letters. I want you to do exactly what we did up here, but notice here, the number line goes up by 1 each time. So you're going to have to be careful where you place your dots. You're going to have to do the best you can with it, okay? So what I want you to do is you're going to have to change some of these to the decimals and figure out where they're going to be on the list here. And it might get a little tricky, and that's okay. So what I want you to do in a moment is you're going to pause the video. You're going to try this on your own by plotting these on the number line. And when you're done with the video, you're going to hit resume, okay? So I want you to do 2 things. Number 1 is to plot on number line. And then I want you to order them from least to greatest. Okay? So go ahead, take a moment, pause the video, and do that for me. All right, welcome back. Yours should look a little something like mine. So if we look here, I have my A farthest away, which is my -7/4. My E is next, -1.3. And then in between my -1 and 0, I have G and then D. So I have -1/4 and -1/10. Now, -1/4 is smaller than -1/10, which is why it's farther away from 0 in between these two. I have C is the only one that's halfway between 0 and 1. B, which is 1.1, and then F, which is 2.8. Okay, so make sure if you need to pause the video to check it with yours, absolutely go ahead and do that. When you're ready, go ahead and flip the page. All right, so now let's take a look here. Now what we want to do is we want to complete the statement using the less than, greater than, or equal to symbol. Okay, so when we compare numbers that are negative, we need to look at their decimal places. And remember, the farther to the left they are, the smaller the number they are. So if I look here, I always start by looking, okay, they're both negative. Now I have to look at the ones place. I have a 2 and a 2. Well, they're the same, so that doesn't help me. So now I need to move to the 10th place, Mrs. Wall, 10th place. So if I look at the 10th place, I have a 2 and a 4. Now, when I look at the number line, 0.2 is going to be closer to 0 than 0.4. So that means that this number is actually greater. That number is closer to 0. So remember, when we think about negative numbers, the closer they are to 0, the bigger they are, right? So now if I look at this one, oh boy, I have no idea what to do, Mrs. Wall. I don't know what those fractions are. Well, that's why we have a calculator. So go ahead and get your calculator out. Do it along with me. So you have -2 and 13/16. So here's how you're going to plug it in. -2, ABC, 13, ABC, 16. When we do that, well, Mrs. Wall, it doesn't tell me anything, right? But if you hit second PRB and then hit enter, it gives me that this is -2.8125. And now if I do the same thing for the other one, -2, ABC 11, ABC 14. Then if I hit my second PRB to change it to a decimal, whoa, this is -2.7857, and it keeps going, but there's no pattern, so I can't do my bar, right? It's not repeating. But that's enough to compare these two, don't you think? So if we look here, we have -2, those are both the same. Then I have in my 10th place an 8 and a 7. Well, 7 is closer to 0, which means it's going to be the smaller number here, right? No, that's a lie. I apologize. Closer to 0 means it's going to be a bigger number when it's negative, Mrs. Wall. So really that means that we're going to be going in this direction. Okay? All right, let's look at the next one. Next one is -5 and 3/11. So I'm not quite sure what that is, so I'm going to type that in my calculator, -5, ABC 3, ABC 11, hit my second PRB, and I get -5.27. Oh, and it looks like it's repeating 272727, but there's a 3 here. Remember, that's because your calculator rounds it, right? So here's our bar. So if we look here, I have this bar means it's negative 5.22, and it keeps going. This one says it's negative 5.2727, and it keeps going. So if I look here, my 5s are the same, my 2s are the same, but I have a 7 and a 2. Well, 2 is closer to 0, which means 2 is going to be the bigger number in this case, which means it's going to go in this direction. All right? Okay, so now looking at the next one, we're going to be comparing these rational numbers. And it says the table shows the elevations of 4 sea creatures relative to sea level. Which of the sea creatures are deeper than the whale? So you want to know which numbers are less than negative 0.8, right? Which ones are farther away from 0 than negative 0.8, because those are going to be the ones that are deeper, right? Deeper means they're down farther in the water than the whale. So I want you to go ahead and take a moment to solve this one, and then think about what if the elevation of the dolphin is negative 1/10? Which sea creatures are deeper than the dolphin? Justify your answer using words and numbers. So I want you to do these 2 questions for me. I want you to go ahead and pause the video, do these 2 questions, and when you're ready, go ahead and hit resume. All right, welcome back. So what I ended up doing is I ended up changing all of mine to decimals. So if you look here, I changed all of them to decimals, and then I thought to myself, okay, which ones are smaller than negative 0.8, Mrs. Wall, 0.8. So if we look here, these 2 are deeper, but the shark is only 0.18 repeating below the surface, which is closer to the surface than this. So if I were to draw a number line, and kind of think about it vertically, right? Here's my whale, and my whale is negative 0.8, but up here is where my shark is. And then down here is where my anglerfish is, and my squid is way down here, right? So these 2 are deeper in the water. Now, what if the dolphin is negative 1/10? Which sea creatures are deeper? Well, if they're negative 1/10, then that means they're going to be way up here, the dolphin is. Because negative 1/10 is negative 0.1, and that's a lot shallower than 0.18 repeating, right? So all of the creatures are going to be deeper than the dolphin, okay, when you compare them. All right, so now what I want you to do is take a look. Now that we've talked about comparing rational numbers and what rational numbers are, now we're going to calculate the distance between them. So remember, when we calculate the distance between rational numbers, it's just like counting the distance between integers. Okay, we have 2 different methods. One is using the number line, and one is using the absolute value formula. For today, we're going to use the number line. All right, but you're more than happy to use the absolute value formula as long as your answers match mine. So what we're going to do here is we're going to locate and plot the numbers 1 1/3 and negative 4 on the number line. Well, if I look here, it's going up by increments of 1, 2, 3. So these are 1/3. So really 1 1/3 is right here. And negative 4 is down here. So now to find the distance between them, I just have to take these 2 numbers and figure out how far apart they are, right? How far their distance is. Well, to do that, from negative 4 to 0, I go up 4, so it would be a 4. And then from 0 to 1 1/3, it's 1 1/3. So if I add these together, 4 and 1 1/3 is 5 1/3. So that's how far apart they are. Oops, sorry. See it? So it's the same thing that we're doing, only this with integers, only now we have fractions because they're rational numbers, okay? So let's look at another one together. So here we go, number 2. So number 2 says locate and plot the point numbers negative 3 5/6 and negative 1 1/6 on the number line. So let's see, we have negative 3 5/6. So it's negative 3. And if I look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's already broken up into 6 pieces. Woohoo! So easy. You're welcome. So let's look. 5, 6 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be right here. So this is negative 3 5/6. And then now remember, negative 1 1/6 is going to be over here because negative 1 1/6 is between negative 1 and negative 2, and it's 1/6 of the way in. So here I have these 2 numbers. Now here's the problem. Can I count the distance from 0 both of these are? No, because they're both negative, right? So instead I actually need to count how many notches. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notches, bring me to -3. And then it looks like I have one hole right here. And then I count from my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm skipping the 1. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 1 and 10 sixths. Well, Mrs. Wall, that's kind of weird, isn't it? It is weird because I have 10 sixths is really 1 and 4 sixths, or really 1 and 2/3 when you reduce it. So I need to add those. 1 plus 1 and 2/3 is 2 and 2/3. So they're 2 and 2/3 apart from each other, okay? Now let's verify that on my calculator. All right. I'm going to have 10 divided by 6 plus my 1, second PRB, 2 and 2/3. Wow, we're good. Beautiful. All right, so now let's look at the next two. So here we go. Locate and plot the number 4.5 and its additive inverse on the number line. What's the additive inverse of 4.5? Well, it's the opposite, right? So the opposite of 4.5 is -4.5. So let's plot those. So if I look here, they're counting up by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, that's weird. Mrs. Wall, you made a mistake. I'm so sorry, guys. Here's what we're going to do instead. Instead, we're going to draw our own. So here's our own number line. We're at -4.5. We have our 0, and we have our 4.5. From -4.5 to 0, we have to go up 4.5. 0 to 4.5 is up 4.5. Together, when we add those, we get 9. So they are 9 apart. Okay? All right, let's look at the next one. Again, I'm not going to use this number line because it's a tad bit confusing. Instead, I'm going to create. So here's my number line. Here's my 0. I have -3.2 and I have 2.4. So I'm going to find the distance between them. Well, to go from -3.2 to 0, it's going up 3.2. From 0 to 2.4, I'm going up 2.4. So when I add those together, let's see, 3.2 plus 2.4, I get 5.6. So they are 5.6 away from each other, okay? All right, when you're ready, go ahead and flip the page. So now the last little bit before practice. It says points S, P, and R are shown on the number line below. It says what numbers are 2.25 units away from point S? So when we think about this, first let's figure out what is S. S is between -8 and -10. Well, that must mean S is -9, right? So what are two numbers that are 2.25 away from S? Now we could go 2.25 this way to the right, or we could go 2.25 this way to the left, right? So what we're really doing is we're either adding 2.25 or we are subtracting 2.25 to see which two are 2.25 apart. So let's do that. We have -9 plus 2.25. Now, if you're not sure what that is, you could always do it on your calculator. -9 plus 2 ABC1, ABC2, or you could do 2.5, is -6. Oh, Mrs. Wall, this should be a quarter. -6 3/4. Perfect. Now we're going to do it the opposite way, -9, and we're subtracting 2.25. So on my calculator, I'm going to do -9 minus 2 AB. So the two numbers that are 2.25 units away from S are these two right here. Right? I could go up and get closer to 0 by 2.25, which would give me -6 3/4, or I could get smaller and go away, be -11.25. So now, what numbers are 6.5 units away from P? So P is -4. So you're going to have to do -4 plus 6.25. And you're going to have to do -4 minus 6.25. I want you to do those two computations here, and I want you to do this one below. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment. I want you to figure out what two are 6.5 units away from -4. And then I want you to do point R2. So go ahead and take a moment, pause the video, see what you get. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look. So you should have got -4 plus 6.5 was 2.5, and -4 minus 6.5 is -10.5. Okay, now when looking at your number line up here, R was 3. So 3.5 units away, you had to add 3 to 3.5 to get this. Subtract to get 1/3. Okay, perfect. So now what I would like you to do is go ahead and do the practice. So you can pause the video. It is now going to be over. Not yet, though. Do the practice the best that you can. And after you're done with the practice, you are going to turn it into the substitute. When you are done with this, if there's time, you have a choice. You could either do your weekly homework that you got yesterday that I handed to you, or you could go online and do your hot problem number 9, and that is on Schoology, okay? All right. I hope you had fun. I'm sorry I was a little nervous. I wish I could be there in person with you, but it was a great time. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.